Our next two speakers are Malik Villani and Jason Key, co-founders of Precision.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. John, thank you so much for the intro and giving us an opportunity to actually present at Covisa. So just a quick introduction from our side. Malik Villani, I'm the co-founder with Jason Key here of Precision. We are a commerce orchestration platform, and we kind of go over about what we do. But firstly, what we want to kind of specifically point out is that payments and connected cars have been going on for a while. When I was with PayPal, John and I had spoken about this a couple of years ago. And what has happened is that there has been movement in the market specifically around connected cars and payments around connected cars, but there has not been a significant change per se. It has not hit mainstream. And what we believe is there are reasons why it hasn't happened, and we're going to talk about that very briefly, as well as what are the things that are missing and how to change the thinking around enabling payments into the ecosystem. So that's why what we are trying to kind of bring to the table here is that there needs to be a paradigm shift and what that means. So at a very high level, what is happening today, at least what we think is happening, is that there are a tremendous amount of payments actually that is happening within the vehicle ecosystem. But the engagement for payments actually is not happening with the vehicle itself. It's actually happening outside the vehicle. It is the consumer that is utilizing his card or going on a website themselves and trying to utilize services that are associated with a vehicle, be it paying at the fuel, charging the car at a charge station, or paying for insurance and so on. But the reality is all these payments are associated with a vehicle itself. Yet the vehicle is not involved in the payments environment. So how do we go about thinking and what needs to happen to make sure that all of these experiences can be brought together when we are engaging or talking about in-vehicle payments? What needs to fundamentally happen is that all these payment experiences, as I'd mentioned earlier, needs to be brought together. And from end to end, from a consumer interaction perspective, from engaging with certain vendors that enable payments, from the technology behind it. And as the gentleman early on had mentioned that, yes, we have to all come together under Covisa to lead the initiative or to make it possible. But what needs to happen is that an entity needs to take a lead. It could be either the OEM, it could be Covisa, but someone has to set the rules of engagement of exactly how it's going to happen, and others need to align. But for that to happen, firstly, there are a lot of challenges. This is something new. I mean, commerce, various kind of commerces that are happening out there comes with a lot of challenges. How can you make it secure? The fraud associated with it. There are regulations around payments, and by the way, these regulations are different for each country. So how do we make sure that we conform to all those? And we want to make sure that how do we manage the ecosystem? Now, what has happened in the past is that when we have talked about commerce in the ecosystem, we have talked about enabling payments. But what we are suggesting or recommending here is that rather than enabling payments in the ecosystem, we need to own the ecosystem. So I'll have Jason actually kind of go deeper into that paradigm shift. So Jason?
Yeah, at the end of the day, there's been a pretty strong shift in the payments ecosystem and how it works with software. What this gets us to is more of the embedded payments ecosystem. So, at the end of the day, an enablement means that, hey, as an OEM, I'll enable a feature for a driver to then engage with a third-party vendor, and then by way engage with that vendor's processor. Using a parking deck as an example, if I pull into a parking deck, am I working with the car and through the car, or am I working with the car is the payment instrument, and the parking deck is a vendor, and their processor becomes the final step, which means now the driver has a three-way relationship. Okay, when you leverage an embedded payments model, the OEM owns the commerce experience. So as a result, they own the driver experience fully. So going back to the example with the parking deck, if you're trying to enter or exit and there's a challenge with the entering or going out, right now the car, you've done the part as driving up to the gate, as it were, but now you're literally forcing the driver to go interact, and if there's any problems, deal with the vendor or the processor. When you have it fully embedded, the car plays a part in the full life cycle while still owning the driver's experience, which is exactly what the OEMs are best at. Owning having the full alignment of the driver experience, which also, as a result of embedded payments and monetization options, means that the OEM now deserves and gets the lion's share of the revenue. So you really sort of have two scenarios here as a result. Enabling just means you're a part of that ecosystem. But when you own that ecosystem, you get a better experience and a bigger chunk of the revenue. If we drill down a little bit as a good example, in this model where you have the car manufacturer ecosystem, this means that literally the token lives inside of the car, or the card itself is a part of the car. They go up to a parking deck in this scenario, and they're then working with, the driver is now working with the vendor and whatever associated partners they have behind them, like their payments provider. That experience is outside of the control of the OEM. It means your experience the driver's experience can be convoluted. If there are problems, who are you going to call? It says my car, I'm in a vehicle, it says it's a vehicle solution, yet if the solution doesn't work or it malfunctions, who am I going to talk to? But finally, reinforcing the fact that the lion's share of the revenue from that kind of model goes to the PSPs in this case, because they still have to own that relationship and sort of address the concerns of both the vendor as well as the consumer. Ultimately, the vendors and the processors control the driver's commerce experience as a whole. And finally, the OEM literally can't see what's going on from a volume and transaction detail experience whatsoever. Let's see. So owning this experience is the end goal. Now we've been seeing this in large vertical software platforms, large software ecosystems, where they start taking over the full ownership of the ecosystem. And what that means in this case is the OEM owns the driver's commerce experience. The OEM knows that experience best, what it should be, so they're the experts in this context. They can provide the best driver experience. The level of effort to do this today is the same as it would be from a referral relationship and what we've been looking at from the enablement model. But doing this means a lion's share of the revenue now goes to the OEM in this case. Best in class security comes from this as well, because they're in control of the ecosystem. And then overall, the better commerce experience as a whole, because effectively it's all under the umbrella of the specific OEM with a model or a framework to leverage this for multi-OEMs. So it thins out the interoperability challenges of saying, well, we have to come out with one holistic standard. We don't really. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to empower the OEMs to provide what they want to provide anyway, which is a better experience, and as a result, derive better revenue from the overall effort.
So financially, what it means. So, I mean, Jason was mentioning, right? enablement versus ownership, and there is an impact on the lion's share of revenue. So let's just take some fundamental numbers. John and I were actually discussing this slide and I believe he had presented some data a couple of years ago, and I took that data and just to kind of add some numbers around it. Today, a substantial amount of payments associated with vehicles is going through the consumer who's interacting, not the vehicle, but the revenue made is outside of anyone playing in the ecosystem. So what's happening is that when it comes to fuel payments or auto insurance, there's a tremendous amount of payments that's happening. But from a current trajectory level, which is if we don't do anything, there's no revenue earned, right? Now, in the past, the mindset was, okay, let's enable payments from the car. But what's happening is that when you enable it, you basically are taking the transaction and you're handing it over to another entity to run those transactions. And then you're hoping that maybe you are given some kind of kickback or there is some kind of rev share. And essentially, I mean, Jason and I have been in the market for years now, and that's a very, very small sliver of the payment. So let's take an example. It's 5 basis points. 5 basis points is essentially 0.05%. So we just did some numbers, right? And looking at the total amount, that's about, if there's payment associated with certain examples in the in-vehicle environment is 629 billion, then the revenue that you would potentially make is 0.05%, which is 314 million. But when you own the ecosystem, now you become a true fintech, meaning you're not just enabling it, you are owning it, which means you own the payments. And when you own the payments, you actually make a much higher percentage on every payment transaction and actually hits your top line revenue. And that right now, for every transaction, is about 300 basis points or 3%. So it's not the payment service provider, PSPs, that making the 3%. It is you who are making the 3% because you can say, this is my payments, I'm enabling it, and it's part of my ecosystem. So the revenue earned is significantly larger. If with that mindset, you're going in and trying to either go from enablement to ownership or going from nothing to ownership, that will fuel the revenue that is needed to actually fuel the changes that needs to be put in to make this possible. Now, what is Precision and how do we come into play? So Precision essentially is a orchestration platform. What it does is that, remember when Jason mentioned early on, is sending the payments and having different type of connectivity and so on. That's where Precision comes into play. It is a orchestration and optimization platform. So from a connectivity perspective, the OEM, when they are ready to run this end-to-end and have provided a great consumer experience in the in-vehicle and want to enable payments, they would connect into Precision, and we would then take you to either a PSP that enables payment for you, which is you're giving it to a third party and making a very small piece of the revenue, or we could also take you to PayFac as a service provider, where it is your payments, you claiming on those payments, but we will provide that connectivity and the logic behind it, giving you choice, control, and leverage. Now, in the end, at a very high level, what it means is that you could be a car manufacturer ecosystem, the OEM, when it comes to commerce, that one single layer that is involved in merchant onboarding, that's involved in connectivity, that's involved around logic of who to send, when to send, and how to send, that is where Precision comes into play. And that is us. Guys, thank you all for letting us participate. And John, if there are any questions, I know we're 1 minute over, so I'm just being cautious of time.
Great. Thanks, Malik. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, we can open it up to everyone here for any questions on the chat. Okay, I think we don't have any questions here. So Jason, Malik, thank you very much. All very
Pleasure.
exciting stuff. And again, if you're interested in reaching out, feel free to either reach out to myself or Mike, and we can get you connected to them.